Okay, well, it's the top of the hour, and I know everybody's got a very busy schedule today, so I'd like to go ahead and begin by welcoming you and going over a few details for today's event. I'm Christine Perret. I'm an independent consultant, and I've been working in the domain of augmented reality since 2006. Today we are going to be conducting a meeting of a task force, and the task force members, some of them will introduce themselves when they speak. In addition to those who are presenting, we also have Bill Denton from York University and Lars Svensson from the German National Library, or the National Digital Library, not sure. But what we wanted to do today is to bring people up to speed on what we're doing in our task force. Before I begin, I'll tell you that we are going to make some presentations. This is being recorded, and we're hosted by the IEEE Standards Association. The IEEE Standards Association will make the recording available afterwards. And we will take questions. We have some questions in mind, some things that we would very much like to discuss with those of you who join us, and we'll put those up and start talking about them after we share our status with you. So please put yourselves on mute if you're not speaking, and think about those questions, and we'll have a discussion the second half of this hour. All right. With that, I think I'll go ahead and get started. Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate the opportunity to bring you up to speed on this AR discovery project. I would like to start by reminding people that we're thinking ahead. This is not a technology or a scenarios, and the things that we're going to discuss are not intended for today. In that scenarios and in the future, we have no technology constraints. So any technology constraint you can bring up today, I'll probably dismiss it and say, oh no, that's not a concern for us. We'll have unlimited, and everything will be very, very small and available and low cost, and all of those obstacles will be out of the way. In addition, there will be so much content ready for use in augmented reality experiences that it really won't be meaningful to count it anymore. We won't be saying, oh, there's this many 10,000 or millions of experiences, because they'll be composed of very, very small or units of information, content chunks that are going to be accessible to people to view in context. And we won't be asking people won't think it's odd to only view things that are local in their AR view. They'll think that that's very normal to have things that are in proximity to them, richer content. In fact, everything that's all around us will be enriched. Every person, place, and thing is the basis for augmented reality experiences from the time that something is conceived, designed, born, throughout its use, its existence, and maybe even there'll be artifacts left afterwards if there's a physical manifestation. And there'll be multiple sources of content for every target. That's another key factor or attribute here, is that there just really will be so much content from commercial sources. Our cities, our governments, our associations will be publishing content. We as individuals will have our own content that we're creating, annotating our world around us, and our societies or our groups, our schools, our businesses will also be preparing content. So that's how I like to set the stage for discovery. And I say, well, let's talk about what is discovery. It's something that replaces what we would have if all of the content were available today and all those conditions were met. that I spoke about before, no technology barriers, you'd have to perform a long sequence of manual steps in order to be able to find the experiences that you needed, or to have your experiences found by others, by the users. If you were a publisher of content, you today and for quite some time, you'll have to go to some effort to promote your content, to make it accessible from a portal, from maybe through social media, and this will consume quite a bit of our time and our resources, making sure people can find the content. And in the place of all of that pain, we would have a lightweight, automatically running continuous systems that help us to find the best AR experiences and the best just content in our proximity. So the outcome of good discovery, of having discovery available and in use, is that experiences that bring the highest value, both from the point of view of the publisher, because they can sell access to those, and the highest value to the end user. Usually, if it's high value to the end user, it's also high value to the publisher. And those would be available without effort, and as long as the target was recognized and we found the physical world object that was associated with that, it would be produced. So I've already mentioned that if we have augmented reality discovery, the publishers would have the greatest potential reach with audiences that really want that content. They wouldn't need to be marketing or maintaining different versions of an application. In fact, I think that the whole phenomenon of applications for augmented reality will be greatly diminished. That's not to say it will go away entirely, but we will rely far, far less on discrete applications for AR. AR will just be a feature in other applications. Could be our entertainment, our tour guide, our navigation applications will have this feature. And the end user will be able to use that feature for a wide variety of valuable services, to find where they are, what they're doing, and to be able to access that using the client hardware and software that they prefer and using virtually no effort. So a very, very idealistic view of the world. I don't mean to be naive, but I think that this is the kind of service and the kind of experience that we need to be shooting for. So what's missing? Well, just about everything, actually. We don't have the management systems, the identity systems to tell our services what we need, what we want. We don't have the software agents. We don't even have the hardware to run those software agents continuously. We don't have the experiences that are connected or cataloged in the discovery services. And today we have very, very light, very manually brokered experiences between publishers and the individual user. I guess the exception to that, as Josh might talk about, is advertising. But we have very, very few of the components that are necessary. So how much time do we have? When is discovery going to matter? Will this matter soon, a year from now, 2 years from now? And I think that a better way of answering that question isn't with a number of weeks, months, or years, but by saying that, like search for the web, AR discovery will be important when there's just critical mass of devices with this capability of content available that people just can't find it the old-fashioned way. It'll have to be defined and just absolutely overwhelm the systems that we have, such as lists or map view. And we'll have conventions for tagging these experiences and making a conceptual framework and software and hardware in interoperable systems so that we don't have to recreate, reproduce, maintain multiple versions and all of those headaches. the users will really understand that there are services out there that are looking out for them, that are anticipating their needs much more effectively than manual search or just serendipity. So that's what I wanted to say, how I want to start this off today. And now I'm going to turn it over to Josh Lieberman. Josh, I'd love it if you could introduce yourself and tell us why this is important and the use cases that you're going to tell us about.
Okay, let me pull stuff up.
If you've just joined us, please mute yourself so that you're not interfering with the meeting. We really appreciate you doing that. If you need some help, I can mute you.
Okay, so let me introduce myself. I'm Josh Lieberman. I'm partly a researcher in geosemantics at the Harvard Center for Geographic Analysis, and I've also worked quite a long time as a standards architect in and around the Open Geospatial Consortium, and W3C. So I'm interested in augmented reality as another step in the sort of reality of the World Wide Web. So how the internet and the web get connected to the real world. There have been many steps in that. One of the big steps has been geospatial web services, so that content in the web becomes representations of features in the real world. But our challenge now is really to make that connection both easy and ubiquitous and really functional. So I wanted to go through some of our thinking about how discovering and how users and providers of augmented reality experiences can connect in the future, where there's lots of content and there's lots of ability for a user to say, I'm here, I'm looking here, what am I looking at? Or, well, how can my reality be augmented with content from the web? So our first step, rather than saying, okay, here's the technology, is really to ask, what's the space of these scenarios where people can really leverage abundant augmented reality content? And in doing this, we're I think most of all looking at a World Wide Web analog. So asking, how are things done in the web today, in the web tomorrow, and how does that get changed by what we expect will be possible with augmentation? So there are many ways to cut this. Here are three possible basis vectors for a space of scenarios or stories about people using augmented reality. You look at the first one, and along the bottom, we consider that there's a kind of a spectrum in how actively the user is seeking content. And this is, we have a situation, for example, where you go and type stuff into your web search box, and stuff comes back, and for the most part, it's stuff that you asked for, that you expressed at that moment an interest in. Now, we know that that's not the whole story, that a lot of the content that may come back in a Google search, for example, is content that people have asked to have presented to you based on partly what you're asking at the moment, but also what your activity has been in the past. So even the most active sort of ad hoc search on the web today is not entirely user-driven at that moment. And this goes all the way to the situation, for example, when you're browsing websites, and these ads start popping up, and yes, that's sort of something I'm interested in, but how did they know? So there's a lot of passive reception of content that's going on as well, and we see this analogy to be relevant to augmented reality experiences as well. So another dimension in the vertical sense has to do with how much forward planning is involved in the discovery process. So we can have a very ad hoc query. Nothing is known about what to discover until you say, I'm here, I'm looking there, what am I looking at? Some very ad hoc query to a other endpoint where everything has been planned out. And for example, the user is at a museum without walls and says, I want to take this tour. It's been planned, it's been configured, and everything is queued up, ready for the user to experience. Excuse me. So that has a number of locations along the spectrum. And then the third one has to do with, why someone is trying to find the right augmented reality experiences. And on the one side, that discovery may be entirely location-driven. I'm here, there's a feature, and focus the discovery on that feature. In other cases, maybe not so much in the sort of tourist vein, but there is a lot of content, and both augmented reality and regular web content, where it's really activity-driven. I think one of the hallmarks of that at the present time is YouTube videos. You're trying to do something, trying to repair your washing machine, trying to change the memory in your computer, trying to tune a piano, and 15,000 people around the world have recorded videos explaining to you how to do that, and you're trying to figure out what's the right video to accompany your activity. And this only gets more specific in terms of what you're doing with what features in what spatial context to find the right augmentation. So that's kind of a space that we see the possibilities for use of AR discovery. Now, looking at these endpoints of discovery, we talked about that sort of timeliness from the ad hoc query, what's that feature there, to a more personalized query, tell me about that feature there, meaning tell me what I'd be interested to learn about that feature there. Someone has prepared some idea of what you would be interested in. To having something that is a little more prepared, well, here's some channels that I'm interested in, and they may be specific to a route, or they may be selected as you go along based on where you are, to something which is very much prepared. Here is your history and profile and what you're interested in, and all of the negotiations to figure out matching experiences to that have already been done, ready to be presented to you in your activity or your route. So speaking of activity, there's the spectrum as well, from the very proactive to the selective and subscriptive, to finally the receptive, that it's really automatic. You may have opted in at some point, but really some other entity is in charge of feeding you experiences based on, well, something that I think we're having trouble coming up with the most appropriate name for. We've used the term context, and the problem with context is that it is very generic. It means everything that we're not specific about. We're talking about these additional elements of a query besides I'm here and I'm asking a question. It's who I am, what I've done, what is my history of asking about experiences, what is the history of other people asking about experiences in this location, and what am I doing at the time? So there's a lot of things besides keywords that would go into an effective search for AR content. And so some of that is to say that additional context rises in importance as the sort of activity, the proactiveness of the user decreases. And then finally, the target of the experiences, what they're being used for, goes from this very locative focus to very task-oriented with various stops in between. So there's a possibility of stories of finding and utilizing augmented reality content that can span a number of these characteristics. And the other step then to ask, what is going to be involved in the infrastructure and environment for discovery is to ask, who are the actors, both in the sense of people and in the sense of entities that in many cases have current parallels in web actors for things like discovery and search and ad negotiations, brokers, and so on. So users and providers and creators are fairly straightforward, but as we've talked through this, there are a number of agents that are probably going to be involved as these systems get built out. An agent that represents the user who's mobile and has a rather limited stream of the content. So the Discover agent may be doing the preparation and prediction of users headed this way. They're interested in this. What can I scrape up for them? And then brokers who engage perhaps in providing that profile and context information when appropriate, the ones who manage distributed queries for content, and also ones in particular who crunch the data to make recommendations, and then finally provide delivery of what can be very complex content at the right time and place. So we have worked up some web pages for some of these scenarios, and the links are in this slide, which I think we'll make available. The what is that, the more ad hoc query, the interested in, somewhat configured, even more configured, that take me on a tour, and then finally these automated deliver me what people want to share with me and what has been determined to be appropriate for my present situation. So just to take a quick look at some of this development in terms of these use cases and agents, we begin to see the outlines of a fairly complete ecosystem for working with and matching and delivering AR experiences. Now, will we see this anytime soon? Probably not, but there are many analogs here to current provision of web content, so it's not so far from reality. So that's something of a vision of what this could be and how it could develop. But I would also say that we don't have just a long-term vision. We also want to develop these ideas and test them out, come up with ways that we can do experiments to sort of proof some of this before we get too full of ourselves and others devising a grand ziggurat. So I'm going to turn things back to Christine and then through to
Actually,
Brodie to talk about some of
it would be good, Josh,
Yep.
could you pass that to Steve? Steve's going to speak now about our status and sort of how to get involved in things.
There it goes.
Thank you.
Hello, this is Steve Brodie. Can you hear me?
Hear you perfectly, Steve.
Okay. So I am going to talk about what we envision as the necessary steps to move forward and try to prototype something and actually get some experience in doing this kind of work, both for ourselves and also for those who would gain from knowing what we've learned. So I have a background in mathematics and computer science, and I've been involved in the geospatial area for about 14 years now. And I actually came to this effort through GEOS, which I happen to be very deeply involved with. And I do a lot of work with standards and interoperability. And so I obviously see a connection between the two, and that is why I initially got involved with this. So I want to talk first of all about what we currently have. Now, as a group, we have been, at least from my perspective, been meeting and discussing things for maybe a handful of months so far. There certainly had been work done previous to us getting together and starting to have meetings. But we as a group have only been involved for, like I said, maybe about 4 or 5 months or so. What we currently have available to us is we have a known collection of standards that can be utilized to realize AR applications and experiences. And those standards sort of break up into many categories of standards. Some of the examples are shown here: graphics, location, sensor, etc. And I put the links in here. I'm sure that Christine will publish these slides somewhere, so these will always be accessible. And you can go to these links to get the greater detail. There's a beginning of an augmented reality vocabulary, and that's also found at the link. We need to do probably more work on this, and I'll get to that in another slide. There was an augmented reality glossary task force that was established in the early part of 2013. I'm not personally sure whether this task force is still in existence or not. I mean, Christine can probably address that. We have use cases, as Josh mentioned, that we've been working on and evolving. And there's an existing augmented reality reference model, which is available at the link shown, which sort of outlines what's envisioned as the type of architecture and design that would go along with developing AR applications and experiences. So what we need to move forward is, well, we talked about this, we need to have a community-accepted AR vocabulary. So there is the start of one, but we need to probably put more work into this and find a way to get it accepted at a greater level than just a committee of people talking on the phone. There are lots of standards development organizations that are available for us to work through if it comes to that, IEEE being a prime candidate for that, because they have a standards association associated with them. We need to have interoperability gains with existing operational initiatives. And so I've mentioned a few here. GEOS, for one. Ion Earth is a burgeoning effort with regards to global interoperability and semantics. EarthCube, which is a National Science Foundation funded initiative, which is also aiming towards having a large cyber infrastructure for global sharing of data resources. And then there's many others that range from a national level to a regional level, to international levels. It would be nice if we had organizational cooperation from places like IEEE or OGC, academia, research projects, things like that. And of course, individual activity. And individual activity can be a combination of simply participation in telecons, or in addition to that, contributions to what our evolving work product is. And we made a decision after some discussion that we think it's a good idea that anybody who's contributing work to this effort make it available using the CC by SA license, which is essentially makes it available, for anybody to use and reuse, but requires attribution. And this is the policy that we've adopted for intellectual property that's being brought to our work product. So contributors can certainly remain the author or the contributor of their assets or resources, but they should be aware that if they make them available to our effort and put them on the wiki or publish them in some way related to our work, that they're doing so on the basis of the CC by SA license. And there's a link to that license here as well that you can go to and look at. So how do we move forward with an eye towards creating some kind of a prototype application or experience environment that we can move forward with? So we need to identify a specific area, application area to work with. So there's the geospatial arena, education arena, medical, etc. We obviously can't we can't put a lot of effort into doing something for everything. So we need to have some discussions about maybe the best place to start and to work towards. And maybe over time we can build up a compendium of prototypes to get people interested and involved. We need to identify the specific use cases that we want to realize. So there's lots of use cases, as Josh pointed out, and maybe we want to address them all initially for a prototype, or maybe we want to just focus on a few. But that needs to be discussed. And in particular, we have these issues that I think Josh mentioned also regarding the user context for AR experiences. And we've been discussing recently the differences between the physical context, which is fairly automatic and doesn't require much interaction with the user, and for lack of a better word, a mental context, which is really trying to capture what the user wants at that moment, what they're thinking, what their mood is, what their desires are, that the kind of thing that would affect the AR experience. And then that is related to whether the discovery is more active or more passive. And of course, it goes without saying that if we're going to try to work on a prototype, we need to identify what kind of a development environment should be used and what kind of development strategy should be used. So this translates, into what kinds of software development kits or application program interfaces are going to be used. There happens to be quite a few of these already available, and the link there actually goes to a page that compares them with regards to many different categories of SDKs. So you can look through them if you wish to. Some of them are open source and some of them are commercial products, but there's a long list there of the different types of capabilities that exist for developing AR software. We also need to identify what kind of application or applications we would possibly want to integrate with. So an example, for instance, in the geospatial arena might be to integrate with the GIOS Common Infrastructure, which brings together data resources for a user doing a search for things on GIOS. And that would obviously have to be worked into collaboration with client applications that are making use of GIOS for possibly crowdsourcing or citizen science type of applications. And then, of course, there's the research and testing of what we're developing as a prototype, because just developing something in a vacuum doesn't do many people a whole lot of good. So one of the areas that we could possibly deploy or develop and deploy a prototype for research and testing is the GS architecture implementation pilot, also referred to as AIP. And that process takes place annually. It's every year, and it's wide open in terms of anybody who wishes to submit a response to a call for participation saying we'd like to work on this. So if there is an opportunity for an augmented reality prototype to be worked on in the context of AIP, that would be a very positive way forward. And there's also OGC, the Open Geospatial Consortium, also has a way forward for research and testing. They call it the implementation. I forgot what the P stands for, but they have a whole implementation program or interoperability program. I'm sorry, IP, and they have a whole interoperability program which is managed by OGC employees and consultants for dealing with specific types of research and testing for deployed applications or services. So those are all things that we could look into to move forward. We also need to develop an architecture and design spec for the prototype that we're going for. This is just sort of normal software lifecycle stuff, software development lifecycle stuff. The AR reference model that I referred to earlier can be a basis for this, guiding us into a specific architecture and design spec for what our prototype is. And obviously, we should include all relevant content that we've generated or made use of or reused to date. And of course, in order for the prototype to be of some use to not just us, but also others in terms of moving forward and evolving what we're working on, we need to collect metrics so that we can measure how successful we've been or what areas need more work. And so that has to be discussed and worked into the prototype. And of course, we develop the prototype, test it with the defined metrics, and then ultimately we would write a report, hopefully, or write some kind of document on our experience and what the results of running the prototype showed. So what is success? So obviously we have to measure and analyze the metrics regarding performance, relevance of the AR experience, what value is added for the user in using the AR application and the AR experiences that go with it. We would need to solicit user feedback, both in terms of the usability and the user experience, which are really two different things. It would be nice to solicit developer feedback, whether it's ourselves or other people who get involved. It would be nice to know how easy the development was using maybe different SDKs if people choose different SDKs to use, the value of the available tools that are at our disposal, and what kind of developer community interest there is. And then gauging the broader community in terms of their interest, where they are in the spectrum in terms of adopting a technology, or actually not just adopting it and using it, but actually embracing it and extending it in terms of helping with the development. And I think that's it. So thank you.
That's really great, Steve. Thank you. If you want to pass me the ball back, then I will sort of frame some of the questions that we had. Now's the time for discussion. So I want to welcome those of you who've taken the time to listen to our background and explain to you our status at this time. Welcome to you all, and I'll share with you a page should be appearing on your screen now that has some questions that we would like to get feedback on and kind of open it up. We don't have very much time, just to the top of the hour. So one of our first questions actually was what's relevant for user context definition, and I want to thank Christian for already pasting something into the chat feature of WebEx. Christian, please, if you want to take a minute to unmute yourself, introduce yourself. Thank you for joining us, and I don't think we'll have time to look into all that you're doing. Very much would like to have you join us in a future meeting so we can get more details.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm Christian Glan. I'm working currently at the ETH Zurich and, well, based in Switzerland. I'm busy in mobile technologies in education specifically. And I've been doing that for the past somewhat 10 years. And augmented reality is one part of it. Specifically, I look more into mixed reality setups where rather than just visual augmented reality. And the piece I referenced here is focusing towards integrated context model. And the authors of that work in 2005 have identified a couple of identifying contexts that help us to set a framing for putting activities and selecting activities for a specific user setting. That's basically in it. And one of it is the location of a user. But there are also other levels like process levels, social contexts, temporal levels, and these things. That's in a nutshell.
Okay, great. That's something good to look for. I also pointed out to the other people in the task force your chapter in the recent book that describes your research to date. I think the more we can acquire automatically, of course, the more likely that the user would not need to learn extra procedures or add extra tools to what they're doing. Is there anyone else that wants to talk about what's relevant for user context definition? It's such a broad term, as I think it was Josh said. It's really challenged whether we even want to use that term. Right now it seems convenient as a code, but perhaps it's a bit large in scope, and many people have come to this study in the past and not been very successful. Well, maybe I would go ahead and put if you want to add something, you can paste it into the chat stream. Maybe I'll just kind of open the next question. We were asking ourselves as we were describing the scenarios and things, if people would prefer, if you think intuitively, would you prefer to be intentional in terms of what you're searching for? What kinds of experiences would you want? Or would you think you find yourself more on the other side of the axis, more automatic or accidental with what you get from discovery? And how would we communicate that about ourselves to a broker? So any discussion, any comments on that topic? Okay, well, you can see the topics are on the screen, so if you have something you'd like to bring up regarding one of the other questions, feel free to unmute yourself and begin to speak. It's one of our goals is to kind of hear what people think about this whole concept.
One of our motivations, and this is maybe something that people would like to discuss, is that there already exists this pixel placement and tracking of people in order to auction off their personal profiles to other companies to provide ads and other sorts of content for quote unquote free websites. So that system of inadvertent and generally unpermitted sharing of personal profiles for these searches is already happening. Does this just extend into AR discovery as well, or is there a more intentional way to go about this?
Any comments, questions? Lars, you've been listening to us. You've been participating in our meetings, and I know one of the things that you bring is a perspective from the data publisher side. Do you have any feeling about whether people are more directed, or would they welcome things that are looser or less well defined in advance?
I have a feeling those people are not clearly defined from the beginning, but really that is something that is sort of an ongoing process. But we still have a very bad grasp of who are the real users and what are they interested in, which also might be that we don't do real tracking of our users for data protection reasons as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, any other comments?
This is Christian speaking. I think you cannot separate the interested or intentional approaches from the unintentional, accidental approaches. I just come from a field experiment, and I found that the participants there had huge problems with incidental popping up of information. They were, for their intentions, much more focused on what their immediate intentions are. But on the other hand, they were very open to, this is confusing, we're very open to the additional information we were able to provide them through our tools. So from that end, it's not really that you can say, is that something to be intentional or is there something to be unintentional, rather than to find the right balance within the context. And that's why I think having a concise contextual model is at the core of providing AR solutions or mixed reality solutions for that matter.
Okay, that's interesting, yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. So this is a classic thing in many domains, right? If you ask people what they will want or what they want to do, they can't tell you. They can only tell you what they do now and whether they like that or not. They don't. Most people don't have sufficient familiarity with all of the different variations.
Another way to look at it is, if you ask someone whether people can have personal information without permission, they'll say no. If you ask whether they like a system that recommends content that happens to work on their personal information, they like that. So there can be a dilemma.
Exactly. Another thing this is related to what Josh just mentioned, and we've discussed recently in our group, is if you have media that's in an AR format that could be available in multiple types, like different learning styles, like maybe you're a kinesthetic learner, or you like visual information, graphics, and somebody else likes text, whatever. You have media types, and even being able to support different media forms for people who are disabled or have other needs. And we don't know, and we'd like to ask if there's anybody, if you're aware of any experiences that are available in multiple media. That it's the same basic goal and the same approach, but it's available in multiple media. That might expose some richness for us in terms of how we could set the context to be send me audio, send me video, send me text, and experiment with that as a retrieval, as a context parameter or a user preference. Does anybody know of any of content along those lines?
Well, all I can tell from a previous project was that the preference-based selections really didn't work. So having some kind of an analytical approach was more beneficial for the outcomes, for a recommender system or for user-based adaptations. So we compared an analytic approach with a preference-based approach, and the preference-based approach, like on learning styles, really didn't work at all, and that was like a real disappointment for us back then. Yeah.
Okay.
So I think having contextually anchored information is really the critical part to begin with, that you can then say, okay, this person is in this setting, this person is in that setting.
Right. Christian, the example I use in that is I say, if I'm crossing the street and you need to present me some information right now, don't give it to me in visual because I might get hit, I might not see a bicycle or something coming, something dangerous situation. Give it to me through audio. But on the other hand, if you hear that the noise level around me is over a certain decibel or whatever, don't try to communicate to me through sound because there's already too much sound for that user in my situation. So that's what you're saying, is that the analytic approach works better.
Yeah, that's exactly the scenario you described is exactly the analytical approach. So you figure out that there's a higher noise level, so you use tactile information, like using the vibrator in the phone or something, to draw attention into a certain direction.
Or both.
Exactly. Okay. So, one of the other questions we have is if we're going to try to do some prototyping and we're going to try to actually produce this test, we need content and experiences that people could contribute for concrete testing. So if you don't have any now, does anybody have any suggestions for where we could go and get this? I mean, I can do a call out to AR developers, but maybe there's a repository, maybe there's some libraries out there that were designed for this. Just like when I think about machine learning, there's a lot of material that's been developed in academia and libraries, faces and trees or whatever. They have collections that are designed for this type of use. Does anybody know of any of those?
Are you talking in terms of prepared content or in terms of anchored information?
Data that is referenced to something in the physical world, not just content, digital content, some text or images, but something that already has it's been referenced, it's been benchmarked or something, so that we know that it's a data set that's accurate and is designed for these kinds of purposes. I know of one that Matteo created for a project that was just finished, the Venturi project, VENTURI, and it had to do with AR for there was a shopping scenario, a navigational scenario, and things. And they did create some sample content that was, baseline, that was already predefined, but I'm just open to any suggestions that people might have for what we can use.
Sorry for letting me talk all the time. I was just recently browsing the OpenStreetmap datasets, the raw OpenStreetmap datasets, and they have a lot of physically anchored information with cross-references into other databases like Wikipedia, but also into other information sets. It's not like comprehensive and entirely complete, but it gives you like total coverage in most areas at least.
Wow, that sounds really like something we should look into. Is anybody else familiar and use OpenStreetmap? I know, Josh, you and Steve are very geospatial folks. Do you get access to those? Have you found what Christian's mentioning?
Yeah, I mean, there's big Christian point of interest information for sure, and expanding the feature types.
Okay, good. So we should go look there. Maybe there's that point of interest. Didn't the OGC have a points of interest activity last year?
Yeah, it's a joint activity with W3C, actually.
Okay.
Also from, this is Bill Denton, also from Wikipedia, they've got all of those buildings and things that are geolocated, and you can pull down the latitudes and longitudes of them.
Yeah, isn't that what Wikitude based its first implementation on 4 or 5 years ago?
Yeah, pretty common data set to work with, but it's big and kind of rich, and and it all links to more information that you can show. Easy to
right.
get, easy to use, but useful, and it's got something everywhere.
Could be parsed too. You could parse the chunks because Wikipedia already has the headlines in there.
Yeah.
Great. I know that we're kind of closing our meeting today, so I want to thank everybody. Is there any other open items or anything else we should talk about? I wanted to summarize before we close. So anything else? Any questions or comments? Okay. Well, I hope that those of you who joined us will not hesitate to contact us and to also tell others about this activity, this task force. You can get more information by going to the project webpage on the AR community portal. I will publish these slides and the link to this recording on the AR community portal to make that more available. There's an archive mailing list that you can join. That information will also be on the AR community portal. If you're not familiar with it, you can just go to arstandards.org. That's the URL. So the archive mailing list on which those of us here on this call today use to discuss items and convene our calls. We do have a weekly meeting at 11 a.m. at this time, actually 11 a.m. Eastern on Mondays, hosted by Josh using the OGC's GoToMeeting service. And if you do want to participate in this discovery project or experiment, that's a little bit higher level of engagement and involvement, but we do hope that people will consider how they can do that if it works in with your other projects. So thank you very much. Thank you, Josh and Steve and the other task members. Thank you, Christian, for your inputs, and really appreciate everybody's participation. So thank you, and have a great day.
Thank you, Christine.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Christine.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Christine. Bye.